More than 2,000 years ago, a man calmly drank poison by his own choice, surrounded by friends who wept as they watched. He could have escaped. He had the means, he had help, and he had time. But he chose to die rather than betray what he believed in. Tonight, we're going to journey through this man's entire life, slowly, from beginning to end, so you can understand how an ordinary person became the most influential thinker in Western history. Relax. Close your eyes if you'd like. I'll take it from here. Socrates was born around 470 BC in Athens, into a humble family. His father was a sculptor who worked with stone and marble, shaping statues for temples and public squares. His mother was a midwife, helping women give birth throughout the city. At the time, no one could have imagined that this little boy would grow up to become a legend. His childhood was an ordinary one. He played in the narrow streets of Athens, listened to stories about the gods, and grew up surrounded by the constant energy of the Greek city, bustling with merchants, philosophers, politicians, and soldiers. Athens was living through its golden age. It was the center of philosophy, art, and the newly born democracy. People debated philosophy in the public squares much the way people today debate sports in cafes and bars. Socrates grew up in that environment, absorbing every word, every debate, every idea that passed by. But there was something different about him from an early age. While the other boys ran and played, he would stop, observe, and think. Long moments of silence. A distant gaze. It was as if his mind was always somewhere else. As he grew older, he followed the expected path of every young Athenian and became a soldier. He fought in difficult battles, faced real danger, and watched fellow soldiers fall beside him. Curiously, even in the middle of war, witnesses said he would sometimes stand completely still, lost in deep thought while arrows flew all around him. It was a strange kind of courage, almost impossible to explain. As though death frightened him far less than it frightened everyone else. After his years in the military, Socrates returned to Athens and lived what many people considered a directionless life. He did not follow his father's profession. He did not accumulate wealth. He did not pursue political office, as respected men of his time were expected to do. Instead, he spent his days in the public square, talking with anyone willing to stop and listen. Merchants, senators, curious young people, travelers, foreigners. Without realizing it, every one of them became part of a quiet philosophical experiment. Socrates looked nothing like the ideal image of a wise Greek philosopher. He was not handsome, elegant, or refined. Quite the opposite. He was described as short, with a flat nose, bulging eyes, and a round belly. He walked barefoot through the streets, dressed simply, almost carelessly. Many people who saw him for the first time doubted that such an odd-looking man could possibly teach anything of value. And that is exactly where the story begins to become interesting. Behind that unusual appearance was a mind sharper than any other in Athens. Without realizing he was creating something that would change history, Socrates developed a way of talking that would transform how humanity thinks forever. He called it inquiry. Today, we know it as the Socratic method. Its power came from something remarkably simple. He asked questions. That was all. Simple questions. Seemingly innocent questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is wisdom? People answered with confidence, convinced they already knew the answers. But Socrates kept asking. And each new question exposed a contradiction in the answer that came before it. Little by little, people became tangled in their own words, gradually realizing, often with embarrassment, that they didn't actually know as much as they thought they did. Imagine the scene. A respected politician, surrounded by admirers, being dismantled, word by word, by a barefoot, unattractive man who was doing nothing more than asking simple questions. This happened over and over again in the streets of Athens. And naturally, it made people uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. But there was something even more intriguing hidden behind this method. Socrates repeatedly spoke a sentence that would echo through the centuries. I know that I know nothing. To many people, it sounded like genuine humility. But in practice, it was a silent weapon. By openly admitting his own ignorance, he encouraged others to feel comfortable, confident, and willing to share their ideas without hesitation. And it was precisely in that moment of confidence that they ended up exposing the flaws in their own reasoning. This strategy became known as Socratic irony, pretending not to know, in order to help someone else realize what they truly didn't know. Brilliant, risky, and deeply unsettling for anyone on the wrong side of the conversation. Over time, young people began gathering around him, fascinated by this new way of thinking. They met around him in the public squares, listening, debating, and learning. One of those young men would become essential to ensuring that this story survived to the present day. His name was Plato. It was Plato who recorded, through a series of dialogues, nearly everything we know about Socrates. Without him, these words would have been lost forever, preserved only in the fading memories of those who had once crossed paths with that unusual philosopher. As his followers increased, so did the number of his enemies. Politicians publicly embarrassed in front of the people rarely forget. Priests whose beliefs were openly questioned rarely forgive. And traditional families, disturbed by the increasingly questioning attitude of their sons, began pointing to Socrates as a dangerous influence. At that time, Athens was living through a difficult period. The city had just lost a long and exhausting war against Sparta. Its pride was wounded. Its economy was fragile. Its people were anxious and uncertain. It was the perfect environment for finding someone to blame. And Socrates, with his sharp tongue and relentless questions, became the ideal target. In 399 BC, he was formally charged with 2 crimes: corrupting the youth of Athens, and failing to respect the city's traditional gods. If found guilty, the punishment would be death. His trial took place before a jury of more than 500 Athenian citizens. He could have defended himself more strategically. He could have apologized. He could have expressed regret. He could have begged for mercy, exactly as people expected. Instead, he did the opposite. He continued asking questions. He continued exposing the weaknesses in his accuser's arguments, even knowing that every word increased the risk of his own conviction. The outcome was predictable, but no less shocking. He was sentenced to death by a narrow margin of votes. If only a handful of jurors had voted differently, history might have unfolded in an entirely different way. Even after the sentence was handed down, there was still one final chance. Powerful friends offered to help him escape from prison, leave Athens behind, and live in exile in another city. He refused. And here's the detail that very few people truly understand. To Socrates, escaping would have meant betraying every principle he had defended throughout his entire life. If he had always preached respect for the law, even when those laws were unjust, then fleeing would have been an unbearable contradiction. For him, dying was more consistent than living as a fugitive. During the final days before his execution, he remained in prison, receiving visits from his disciples and friends. Instead of despair, there was calm. They spoke about the soul, about what happens after death, about the true meaning of a life well lived. When the appointed day arrived, he was taken to drink hemlock, a poison extracted from a plant that slowly paralyzes the body, beginning with the limbs and gradually moving toward the heart. His disciples, gathered around him, could not hold back their tears. Socrates, on the other hand, remained almost impossibly serene, as though that moment was not an ending, but simply another step in a long journey of discovery. He drank the poison without hesitation. He felt the cold slowly rising through his legs while he continued talking about philosophy, about the nature of the soul, and about what truly matters when everything else fades away. His final words were not words of fear, nor of regret. They were words of reflection, spoken until his very last moment of consciousness. This scene, described in remarkable detail by Plato in the dialogue known as Phaedo, would become one of the most studied and remembered deaths in all of human history. More than 2,000 years later, it is still taught in universities, analyzed by philosophers, and discussed in classrooms around the world. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is not his death itself. It is what came after. Socrates never wrote a single book. He left behind no written record of his own ideas. Everything we know about him comes through other people, above all, through Plato, who became his most devoted disciple and carried his legacy across the centuries. Plato, in turn, taught another thinker who would become just as essential to the history of philosophy: Aristotle. And so an extraordinary chain of knowledge was formed, passing from teacher to student across generations. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These three names, linked together in that remarkable sequence, became the foundation upon which all of Western philosophy would later be built. Without their ideas, it is possible to argue that modern science, the ethical systems that shape our laws, and even the democratic principles that support much of today's world might never have developed in the way we know them. It all began with a poor, barefoot, ordinary-looking man standing in the streets of Athens, asking uncomfortable questions. And there is a powerful irony in this story that's worth pausing to reflect on. The man who was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth eventually became recognized, across the centuries, as one of the greatest educators humanity has ever known. The very questions that led to his execution are now taught as essential tools of critical thinking in law schools, psychology programs, and leadership training around the world. The Socratic method, that simple sequence of thoughtful questions, is still alive today. Teachers use it to encourage deeper reflection in the classroom. Lawyers use it to challenge arguments in courtrooms. Therapists use it to help patients question limiting beliefs. All of this began with a man who claimed, with apparent humility, that he knew nothing. And perhaps that is the quietest and most powerful lesson Socrates left us, without ever writing a single word himself. True wisdom is not found in having all the answers. It is found in having the courage to ask the right questions, even when those questions make us uncomfortable, even when they expose our own weaknesses. Today, we are surrounded by instant information, quick answers, and easy certainties. Rarely do we stop to question what we believe at a deeper level. Across the centuries, Socrates invites us to do exactly that. To pause, to question, to reflect, before accepting any truth as final. He paid with his own life for the freedom to think and to question openly. And in a strange and poetic way, that choice made him immortal. While his accusers have long been forgotten by history, the name of Socrates has endured for more than 2,000 years. It continues to be spoken, studied, and admired in nearly every corner of the world. Perhaps the next time you feel tempted to accept an opinion without questioning it, or to repeat something simply because everyone else does, you'll remember that barefoot man standing in the marketplace of Athens, asking simple questions, challenging the powerful, relentlessly searching for something deeper than easy answers. This is the story of Socrates, a man who left behind no written works, yet forever changed the way humanity thinks through the power of questions. Rest tonight knowing that more than 2,000 years ago, someone wrestled with the very same difficult questions that may still linger in your own mind. And somehow, that connects you to a long chain of thought that stretches across all of human history. If this story brought you a moment of reflection tonight, there's another video on the channel exploring the life of a philosopher who also challenged everything society believed. A perfect choice if you'd like to continue relaxing and learning before you fall asleep.